This video is multiplying complex numbers. If you haven't watched the video about multiplying polynomials, you really probably should go back and watch that because this is essentially the same thing as multiplying polynomials. The only difference is that we're going to be dealing with an I here, and there's going to be something that happens when you multiply and you get I squared. But as far as the rest of the problem, solving the rest of the problem, it's going to be the same as multiplying a polynomial. So we're going to start by rewriting the problem. So we're going to take that first set of parentheses and we're going to break it into two parts. We have a 4 and a positive 9i. And we're going to multiply the 4 times the second set of parentheses, 6 times 2i. And we're going to multiply the positive 9i times 6 minus 2i. So we rewrite the problem just like we did in multiplying polynomials. And then we're going to distribute. So we want to get rid of those parentheses. So we're going to take the thing that's in front of the parentheses and multiply it times everything inside the parentheses. So 4 times 6 is 24. And 4 times negative 2i is negative 8i. And positive 9i times 6 is positive 54i. Once again, positive 9i times negative 2i is negative 18. And I times I is I squared. So this I squared is where things change. We have an I squared. I squared equals negative 1. So we need to change this. We need to change the I squared to negative 1 and multiply it times the constant that it's stuck to. So we're going to take this I squared. I'm not even going to rewrite the whole problem. I'm only going to rewrite this end of the problem. So negative 18 and this I squared changes to a negative 1. So there's my change. Then I'm going to multiply negative 18 times negative 1 is positive 18. Then I'm going to bring all this down. 24 minus 8i plus 54i plus 18. So the only thing new in multiplying complex numbers compared to multiplying polynomials is this right here. Changing this I squared to a negative 1 and multiplying it times the constant. Because then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to combine like terms. So because we have a binomial times a binomial and we set the problem up like this, our like terms have landed right in the middle. But they've also landed at each end. Because that I squared turns into a negative 1, we end up with like terms on either end and like terms in the middle. So I'm going to do the 24 and the 18 first. So 24 plus 18 is 42. And negative 8i plus 54 is positive 46. And that is where my I term is at. You have to do one other thing. You have to make sure I is at the end. Remember, this is a complex number. Complex numbers are written in the format A plus BI. So they need to, your final answer when you're multiplying complex numbers needs to be written in the same format. Let's look at it. Let's do another example. Because the biggest thing you're going to have to deal with is signs and signs changing. So this problem is negative 3 plus 12i times 7 plus 4i. So we're going to take the first set of parentheses apart. Well, let's make an I that looks like an I there. And we're going to multiply both pieces by the second set of parentheses. So negative 3 times positive 7 is negative 21. Let me get that on the screen there for you. And negative 3 times 4i is negative 12i. And 12i times 7 is positive 84i. And 12i times 4i is positive 48i squared. So we have rewritten the problem. We have done the distribution. Now we need to change I squared to a -1 and multiply it times the constant that it's with. So we're going to take this part of the problem. I'm going to take this entire section of the problem. I'm going to say positive 48 times -1. And a positive 48 times a -1 is negative 48. And then I'm going to bring the rest of the problem down so that I can finish it out. Negative 21 plus 12i plus 84i. Minus the 48 that we just transformed because of the I squared. So like terms on either end, negative 21 minus 48 is negative 69. And like terms in the middle, negative 12 plus 84i is positive 72i. So, things to summarize down here at the bottom. I squared equals -1. Make that -1 look a little better. Equals -1. You need to watch your signs. Signs trip everyone up. Remember, a positive times a positive is a positive. A negative times a negative is a positive. The only time you get a negative answer is when you have a negative times a positive. Also, don't forget, multiply that -1. When you make that change, you need to multiply -1 by the constant, that plain number that's in front of it. You need to make that multiplication happen. So let's do a couple more problems. So let's do 6 minus 5i times 3 minus 10i. We're going to rewrite the problem. 6 times 3 minus 10i minus 5 times 3 minus 10i. 6 times 3 is 18. 6 times negative 10i is negative 60i. Negative 5 times positive 3 is negative 15. Oh, I forgot to put the I on that 5 right there, didn't I? So negative 5i times 3 is negative 15i. And negative 5 times negative 10, so negative 5i times negative 10i is positive 50i squared. Make sure that you don't make the mistake that I almost made there. Make sure that when you're writing the problem down, you write down all the pieces, because if you leave out a letter or a number or a sign, you're going to end up with a wrong answer, and then we're both going to be confused as to how you got the wrong answer after you did all that good, correct work. So we are going to deal with this. We're going to say plus 50, and we're going to change I squared to -1. So positive 50 times -1 is negative 50. And then we're going to bring down the rest of the problem. 18 minus 60i minus 15i. And then all we got to do is combine like terms. So positive 18 minus 50. Positive 18 minus 50 is negative 32. And negative 60i minus 15i is negative 75i. You have to be in the complex number format when you get your final answer. If it's not in the complex number format, it's technically wrong because you have not written it correctly. This is one of the few times that writing it correctly, writing it in the correct order, is really important, because that's part of knowing that it's a complex number and not thinking that this is just some random variable that for some reason somebody chose to use I as their variable. This is specifically an imaginary number. One more example. 9 minus I times negative 6 plus 2i. So we're going to say 9 times negative 6 plus 2i, and negative I times negative 6 plus 2i. So 9 times negative 6. Don't be afraid to use your calculator. Everybody seems to think that they should be able to do all of this in their head. There's no reason to do it all in your head unless you don't have a calculator. If you're comfortable with a calculator, use your calculator. And then 9 times 2i is positive 18i. Negative I times negative 6 is negative 6i. Multiplication is a place where we all tend to get tripped up a little bit, especially as the numbers get bigger and bigger. So use your calculator if you're not sure. Use your calculator to check your work. Negative I times positive 2i is negative 2i squared. So we've got to deal with this because we got an I squared. So we're going to say negative 2. We're going to replace that I squared with a negative 1. So negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2. And then we're going to bring down the rest of the problem. So we've got negative 54 plus 2. So negative 54 plus 2 is negative 52. So that goes with that. And then in the middle, we've got our i's, and we can say 18 minus 6 is 12. And those were where our i's were at. So 52 plus 12i. So things to keep in mind. If you can multiply polynomials, you can multiply complex numbers. The only thing that makes complex numbers different is right here in the middle. You have to stop and you have to change an I squared to a negative 1 and multiply that so that that I squared disappears. And then make sure that you write your final answer in the correct format, which is just a constant plus a constant with, well, a constant with the variable I. This is the complex number format, so make sure you got it in the correct format.